Hey, good morning. Good morning. From all of us at JM&A, we would like to welcome our LinkedIn family and friends who are spending their time with us today. As advertised, we are here to talk around one of the most discussed F&I industry topics, profit participation programs. The growth over the past decade has certainly fueled dealers to additional profits, acquisitions, and wealth around the industry. My name is Ian Hunter, VP of Strategic Partnerships at JM&A Group, and I am joined with my esteemed colleague, Chris Bhim, Manager of Structure Operations. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
All right. And I think we've got a pretty good audience joining us today here on our LinkedIn Live session. Today we will take a dive into a multitude of programs that involve dealer participation. Again, these are high level overviews that summarize opportunities, and we will also point out advantages and considerations to always take into effect. As with most topics, the details matter, and while today we'll give a great education, there's always need for further discussion to identify your specific needs and, of course, situations. And those are welcomed follow ups. In fact, a couple items today to address as we move through our presentation. There will be an opportunity for you in the chat to post your questions. We will save time at the end for a brief Q&A to address those questions that were posted. Additionally, we will add a link at the end for you to be able to take the next step, whether it be into your education of am I doing things right today, or what should I be looking at into the future. That link will be an assessment that will create follow-up conversation, both for education and strategy, as discussed. So, with that, Chris, are we ready to get started in our first program structure of the day?
We are ready, Ian.
All right. Well, moving forward, so probably one of the hottest acronyms we've certainly heard over the past few years, and which has come to light, but has really been around for a couple of decades. I know we have been involved here at JM&A in that time frame with this structure as well. But the DOOC program, Chris, how about you get start us with an overview?
Sure. So a DOOC, a dealer-owned operating company, also referred to as dealer-owned warranty company, allows a dealer to participate in underwriting and investment income through ownership of an administrative corporation that acts as obligor for F&I products. This structure is ideal for dealers who want to defer taxes for several years, but still want access to profits along the way. It's also a great option for dealers who are focused on business expansions or have other immediate needs, and well suited for larger dealer groups that need something flexible but similar to a single entity participation model.
Yeah, I think from an overview perspective, great start. And what I would, one of the questions when we go around the industry and we're talking to different dealers and people, whether they be getting started or have been doing it for a while, Chris, is a structure like this, is this something meant just for the larger groups, or, are we experiencing within our programs a myriad of size?
We are experiencing a myriad of sizes. It's not strictly for larger dealer groups. A single point store certainly could be a good fit for a DOOC. It all depends on the volume at that store, the dealer's specific needs, and so it's not one size fits all. It's not meant for certain dealers over others. It certainly fits those single point entities as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And as we mentioned in the kind of the intro around what details matter, certainly strategy plays into effect. But as we know, I mean, there are single point stores that sometimes outperform from a volume perspective, even small groups of maybe two, three, four stores. So that's great. What would you point to, Chris, as maybe one of the bigger considerations that we've listed here when you think about a dealer-owned operating company?
So I would definitely be mindful that once the DOOC becomes taxable, you'll be looking at both federal and state income taxes. Plus, it's subject to state regulatory oversight, which is something to keep in mind. And the tax deferral might only last for the first several years, depending on the number of contracts sold and the product mix, plus a runoff period. and the exit strategy can be a bit uncertain due to some complex tax rules and attribution concerns.
Yeah, I think a couple great points to consider. Clearly, when you talk about the taxable event and situation, understanding ownership, understanding, where those funds are to be funneled thereafter is part of that details that we talked about earlier on. But I would certainly state, and I think you did a great job. This is one of those programs when you think about fueling growth, you think about access to capital. I know one of the other pieces of conversation we have most around a program like this is the ability for branding and kind of form control. And so there is certainly a lot of pros, but there's a lot to consider when moving into becoming a program essentially as yourself. So I think it's a great start, a big topic of overview for one of the hottest acronyms in the industry today, Chris. So moving forward, let's jump into probably one of the most popular, certainly over the last decade, when we think about, again, smaller rooftops groups or even single stores that are creating different wealth. But the PARC program, many know also as the CFC or Controlled Foreign Corporation, Chris. Tell me a little bit more.
Sure. So in a park, a dealer participates in underwriting and investment income through the ownership of a foreign or sovereign reinsurance company that elects to be taxed as a U.S. insurance company. Park structures are for dealers who want to maximize their profit participation while taking advantage of tax benefits, all without a large upfront capital investment.
Yeah, this is one I know sometimes they ask when you start saying, foreign corporation, et cetera. Describe a little bit of the difference between, hey, where is this domiciled, or is that offshore, and then kind of where are the funds held?
The funds are all held in the United States, and the foreign company is electing to be taxed as a U.S. insurance company. So all the money stays right here in the United States.
And from a consideration perspective, I see you put the first bullet here around kind of premium limitation. Will you expand on that for the audience a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So the park structure is limited in the amount of net written premiums it can cede annually. If you're planning on growing your reinsurance business beyond this threshold, you may need to consider alternative strategies or additional reinsurance companies to manage the excess. If you decide to establish multiple parks, you should be mindful of controlled group rules. This means that if you and your spouse or any related parties own shares in different parks, the IRS may treat them as a single entity for tax purposes. So this could limit the number of parks you can establish or alter how you structure them for tax efficiency. Year over year, we have seen that net written premium that cap has increased. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, what have those increases looked like just over the past couple of years from a financial perspective?
So in 2024, it's currently 2.8 million. In 2023, it was 2.65 million.
Yeah, and something you described just a minute ago, Chris, I think is important to understand. In this structure, ownership matters. Obviously, we have a lot of our dealers and dealer groups with multiple CFCs or park structures based on who may be participating. One of the other ones I know we're going to visit in just a minute that a lot of the questions come up is, when a dealer wants to get potentially an operating manager as part of their compensation into a participation program, we often see some of that hybrid model. And I think when you think about all of these structures that we're talking about today, hybrid is really a key phrase and word that is used and utilized through the dealers based on ownership, based on strategies, and even from product to product, something to consider. So here, good pros
Yeah.
and considerations. Let's move on, Chris, to I believe is our retrospective commission program. So overview here to start.
The retro structure offers dealers a way to participate in underwriting profits without taking on the full risk of reinsurance. So dealers receive an annual payout on current year underwriting plus investment income. It's a great middle ground option for dealers who want to share in the program's success but prefer to limit their exposure.
Yeah, take us through some of these pros and considerations that you've labeled out.
So the retro structure is really dealer friendly because there's no upfront cost to get started. Dealers can jump in without needing significant capital investment. It's a hassle-free, low barrier entry option. One of the best parts of retro is that if the program goes upside down and there are losses, the dealer isn't held liable. So this reduces risks and gives dealers a safety net, making it an attractive option.
Yeah, and if we kind of reference back just to the park a minute ago, from the DOOC that we started with, I know the park has some consideration for upfront capital to be able to fund, obviously, the corporation. That is one of the big interests when it comes to a retrospective, particularly around a dealer looking to get started. So, Chris, when you think about a retrospective, I know a lot of times the dealers that are maybe moving off of a particular program that they've been in for years and want to kind of dip their toe into participation and risk. What do you see from a retrospective as far as serving that desire?
I think it's a great option because it provides dealers with the transparency. They get to see how the block of business performs without having to take on that risk. It gives them exposure to the reporting that we provide and gives them a taste of what that participation could look like if they choose to move in that direction in the future into more of a reinsurance type structure.
Yes, absolutely. And a couple of times on the slides here, I've seen the word investment. I think it's worthwhile to maybe take a minute, particularly when we were talking about the park program and a CFC. Obviously, these reserves, Chris, we know it's an insurance and they earn over time based on contract term mileage, etc. Once those funds earned, obviously there's an opportunity when it gets out of a regulated state to be a little more aggressive on those investments. I've learned, but I do think it's a key point, as you've stated here on the presentation, that both the park, kind of the retrospective here, great investment opportunities exist on those premiums as they are built. And one thing, I think it's always worth mentioning, Chris, performance matters, right? Obviously, the sale of the contract spurs all of the growth, respective around what type of participation program you're in. So, fueling that F&I performance, we have a great field team around the country that I know supports thousands of dealers in our base and helps just kind of put more contracts away, which is ultimately premium. So I see you've put the investment here. Certainly something that be considered in all of these programs.
Absolutely.
How about we click one more forward and in this particular program, take us through maybe what we've kind of coined and referred to as simply a one plus.
The One Plus structure is designed for dealers who want immediate access to cash. With this structure, dealers get their standard commission plus an additional One Plus commission for every sale. It's perfect for those who need cash for debt reduction or business expansion, and it doesn't require waiting for reserves to earn out like other participating structures.
Great. Yeah. So this obviously, when we take a look at one of these programs, certainly brand mix, sales mix, all of that matters when it comes to, hey, what dollar amount am I going to be given, and taking a look at loss ratios for programs, etc. So again, a great upfront cash option, as you mentioned. One of the things here I see you've noted is kind of no built-in investment management, but maybe for the audience listening today, maybe take them, Chris, when we elect or dealers elect to go into a structure like a One Plus, what do you hear them say around investment and what they're doing?
That would be a great question for one of our consultants who spend a lot more time discussing those types of things with our dealers. But I know that a lot of dealers will use it for immediate needs, and some don't necessarily even think through the investment process. They might not have an investment manager, and so that's why it's really important to consider that. You'll have excess cash up front, but if you don't know how to invest it, this may not be the right structure for you. And one of our participating structures that has built-in investment management would be a better fit. But you mentioned loss ratios, so I think that's an important thing to call out here because irrespective of loss ratios, dealers will get paid their One Plus on every contract sold. So that's one of the top benefits of this program.
Yes, certainly can be a high reward with a very, very low risk.
Mhm.
Obviously, from an agreement perspective, with that being put into writing, what will be kind of guaranteed per contract. And I think it's worth mentioning on this program as well, from a payout perspective, whether it be monthly, quarterly, or annually. the flexibility here, but certainly the ability to be able to get your hands on the dollar a little more quickly. And in my experience, I think one of the things that I've certainly learned and heard in some of the dealers in a strategy like this is, you mentioned it, certainly paying down, whether it be debt, looking to acquire other things outside of the automotive space, but also, those that do have their own investment interest or advisor, they take the funds, they get them in the hands of that individual or group, and then they believe that they can yield a percentage. Great. So I think great overview of the One Plus program that certainly gives some insight as to what we offer there. And moving into one of our final structures that we will review today, let's talk about the big non-controlled foreign corporation program. I know it's given or had a few changes over the last several years based on some things that have come out. So, Chris, maybe take us through an overview and some of those changes that you've seen over the last few years.
The NCFC, in an NCFC, the dealer participates in underwriting and investment income through the purchase of shares in a foreign multi-owner reinsurance company, so an already established reinsurance company. This structure is typically used by large volume dealers who want to maximize tax efficiency and defer income without worrying about annual ceding limits. There are tax advantages in this structure. One of the biggest benefits of the NCFC structure is that there are no annual ceded premium limits, such as PARC. So this gives the dealer flexibility to cede as much business as they want without restrictions. If you're a large volume dealer, this allows greater scalability and potential to maximize your participation in reinsurance. So that's nothing new. That's, NCFC has always operated that way. But distributions from NCFC are currently taxed as qualified dividends, which are taxed as long-term capital gains rate, usually much lower than ordinary income tax rates. This makes the NCFC structure highly tax efficient for dealers looking to maximize after tax returns on their F&I product income. And this structure also offers more robust investment guidelines compared to structures like PARC, which often leads to larger investment returns over time. So there have been tax changes in the last 6 years, but despite those changes to tax code, it's still a tax efficient structure.
Yeah, so I know we've certainly operated a couple of the NCFCs over the years, and the dealer base that's in those. I think the one way that I always looked and kind of gave the explanation and around an NCFC is you kind of take that CFC, remove the premium limit, and then you become kind of a piece of the pie, which is sometimes an interesting concept for some. But I will tell you that over time, with the ability for scale and the amount of reserves that are ultimately generated, it gives a little bit more aggression on the investment income and yields a little bit better percentage we've seen. So from an NCFC program, tell us a little bit about, you said it's operated kind of by a board. So that board is approval, I think, both for entry and distributions is what we were referring to. Yes.
Yes, so any distribution from the NCFC are subject to approval by the board of directors. The board might even require dealers to take distributions to prevent negative tax consequences for the group. Additionally, direct borrowing against shares is not allowed, although indirect borrowing, so using shares as collateral, is possible in this structure.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note. Certainly in any program, the cost of funds has ideally and certainly been a topic of conversation over the last couple of years with the rise of interest rates. And so I think certainly something for dealers to consider as you talk about strategy, you talk about access to capital, what is it that you're going to be looking to do? You could hear, obviously, in like a One Plus structure, that capital is going to be to you automatically. In a retrospective commission structure, it's also going to be coming in a more normal cadence, where in some of your other deferred income strategies, access to capital is certainly still there. And I think that's where you kind of ask questions. And, when you project out your volume against your sales mix loss ratios, you having unearned and earned reserves, that's where we talk about more of those details are worth the conversations so that you can correctly and strategically place out what program you believe will fit your short and long-term business needs. So from an NCFC, any other outstanding things, Chris, you think are just important to note here I know we've talked about in the CFC, obviously a controlled foreign corporation, the money stays onshore, the entity is offshore. I think, the NCFC, maybe just speak a little bit about both the funds. Obviously, I see the excise tax of 1% that we put there additionally with the corporation.
Yeah, so in an NCFC, the funds are kept offshore, and that's why you pay that 1% federal excise tax on premiums. And those taxes can affect overall returns, so it's important to factor them into your financial planning when considering this structure. And partially because of the funds being, well, entirely because the funds are being held outside of the United States is why it's you're unable to borrow.
Yes, and I think, just kind of summing up on the NCFC, we've certainly talked a little bit about, hey, do I need to be a large dealer group? Am I a single point store? Do I have a few rooftops? I would say, do you agree, Chris, primarily in the NCFC program, there's certain volume metrics that probably make sense for this, a little bit of those dealers that are at scale a little bit larger?
Absolutely, especially because this is not a structure that's as easy to enter as others because you do have to be voted into the NCFC.
Right. Which I think is also great for the business that is put in. Obviously, when it's approved, those dealers that are selective, you can know you're joining the top of class. So, excellent
Yes.
overviews here, Chris. I think one of the things that we obviously wanted to leave you all with as we come towards the back lap of our journey here is, what are the takeaways when we talk about structure? We've alluded to many different factors, certainly identifying and keying in on your strategies. But overall, what we, first here, we want you to understand there's no one size fits all structure. You've heard there's maybe some structures that lend themselves to the larger size, but for the biggest part of the matter, it's around your goals and fitting into what is going to maximize what you were trying to accomplish. We talked even about some of the hybrid structures. I would say a great percentage of the dealers that do business with us today do have some type of hybrid structure, whether it be via the ownership or own potential and particular products. Additionally, reevaluate as your business evolves. I think, one of the things that I know our field is always trying to stay in tune with, as well as our structure solutions team that obviously you are a part of there, Chris, is the idea about staying in contact, obviously from a quarterly review basis, but more importantly, what's coming up is, are you looking to retire? Are you just getting started? Are you looking to fuel growth? Are your capital needs increasing? So reevaluating on a consistent kind of annual basis, much like you would maybe even do your auto or home insurance, and looking at those rates, looking at your structure is similarly responsible. Flexibility is key. I think you heard that amidst all the programs. We've talked about certainly the consideration for your future growth. And what I'll leave you with is kind of a couple things around topic number 5, but we talked about fueling performance in the F&I office, and the sale of the products fuels all of these structures. That's really where it all starts. But additionally, having great data and reviewing it consistently, then also having experts, whether it be through our actuary team, structure solutions, and those in which you communicate with around your structural, creating actionable insights. There are certainly rises in labor rates, your sales mix changing. There are a myriad of topics that you should be staying on top of. A lot of our dealers, Chris, I know they refer to as a structure as kind of their 13th financial month or even additional dealership, but active management around it, we've certainly seen be key. Anything, Chris, kind of add from a takeaway perspective for our audience here?
No, I think you nailed it. We have such a great sales team. My team here, the structure team, we have incredible consultants that are just so knowledgeable in this, and an investment manager that typically works with our dealers in our PARC structure, and just a wealth of knowledge that is available to our customers and our prospects and anyone out there that is really looking to dig deeper into these structures. Again, you mentioned the assessment. I think it's great for anybody listening in to take that at the end of this, and we'll get you in touch with someone from our team.
Yeah, awesome. Next steps. Well, as promised, I think we've got a few minutes left here, Chris. We're going to maybe jump to some of the questions that were asked. So, question 1, let's see. What is the biggest difference again from the CFC to the NCFC?
The biggest difference would be that there's no premium limit on NCFC. So you don't have to open, multiple reinsurance companies, but you mentioned a hybrid structure. So you still have that option with an NCFC. You can seed some of your business into the NCFC and others into a PARC structure. So that's a great option for dealers who might hit that cap. And then there's differences in the taxes. So in NCFC, you do not pay taxes on investment income, but you do pay taxes on the excise tax.
Right, right. Yeah, you mentioned it. No tax on the income or the investment income that you would on a CFC, not on an NCFC. Okay, so another question here. What are the main reasons a dealer would select the retro structure?
Main reason a dealer would select that structure over another participating structure is that they want to get some experience with a participating structure, but they're not quite ready to take on the risk. So, as mentioned earlier, it gives them some transparency into how the block of business will perform, allows them to dip their toe. Again, they can put some of their business in a retro, and they can put some of their business in a park. But most of the time, it's a dealer who's not quite ready to take on that risk.
Yes, great points. The thing I would maybe add, Chris, I alluded to it when we were on the PARC CFC slide, is some of these dealers that are looking to get operating partners and managers into some of the participation as part of their compensation package. We often see the retro used as that. Obviously, with no setup costs, it's easy for the operator to get involved in. Additionally, should they go a different direction in the future, there's not a lot of long time hold that then they would have to go through a lot of agreements and process out. They're just kind of splitting some of that premium percentage to a program like a retrospective, which gives some insight and some obviously compensation for that operating manager.
And something else I'll add to that, with both the retro and the park structures, there are somewhat simplistic exit strategies for those structures. Earlier, we mentioned that there wasn't really an exit strategy for DOOC, so that's another benefit to the retro and the park is that there is that exit strategy.
Yeah, great consideration. So this is a good question. I assumed maybe something like this would get asked, but Chris, what structure might be considered the superior structure?
I'm sure there's a lot of opinions out there about that, but there really is no superior structure. The best structure for your dealership depends on your specific needs, access to cash, investment interests, and risk appetite. So it's also important to consider both your short-term goals and your long-term goals. So looking at the big picture and definitely reevaluating your needs because you're not married to the structure. So if it fits your needs today and maybe in a couple years you need to pivot, you have the option to do that.
Well, that's great. I agree. And I would say, the takeaways: fuel the performance, obviously select your short and long term goals, identify kind of your risk tolerance and what you're trying to accomplish in the near and short term. I think that, Chris, that segues perfectly. You talked about just a minute ago the assessment that we are going to link here in the chat. So please take advantage of that. That will cue any additional conversations and questions we'd love to be involved with as follow up here. Again, we will be at NADA in January. Please come visit us. We are at booth 6524 this year, and we will have some of our experts in person if you'd like to bring those questions along. So, Chris, it's been a pleasure today kicking us off. Obviously, our audience, thank you all for joining.
And follow, like, and share.
Always. And with that, we will hope you have a great rest of your day and week. And here's to an awesome year-end close. Thanks
And
again.
happy Thanksgiving.